Do not break the seal. Do not read the words. Do not question what is inside. The royal guards of the household division are famous for many things: the bearskin hats, the crimson tunics, the iron discipline, the 1,000-yard stare that makes tourists step back 3 feet without being told. But there is one rule that sits above all others. It is not written in the public handbook. You will not hear it mentioned during the changing of the guard, but every soldier who has ever worn that tunic knows it by heart. The order of the sealed envelope. When a royal statement is signed by the sovereign or their designated representative, it is folded, sealed with wax, and stamped with the royal cipher. A guard is assigned. That guard takes the envelope. That guard walks it to the destination. That guard does not open it. That guard does not hand it to anyone else. That guard does not slow down, speed up, or acknowledge any distraction until the envelope reaches the designated reader. 200 years. 200 years of unbroken tradition. Until today. 012. My name is Corvus. I am a raven. I have lived in the Tower of London for 43 years. Before that, I lived in the walls of Buckingham Palace. Before that, I lived nowhere. I was hatched in a gutter behind a pub in Pimlico, which is not the noble origin story people expect from a royal raven, but nobility is mostly performance anyway. I have watched 17 sovereigns come and go. I have watched hundreds of guards march, stand, sweat, faint, and sometimes, very rarely, smile. I know the rules better than the humans do because I have never had to follow them. That is the privilege of being a bird. You watch, you wait, you laugh when a tourist gets too close and the guard shouts, "Stand back from the Queen's Guard," and the tourist jumps so high they drop their ice cream. But today was different. Today, I watched a guard break the one rule that has never been broken. And I watched him do it for the right reason. 028. Let me tell you about William Thatcher. Call him Will. Everyone calls him Will. He joined the household cavalry at 19, not because his father was in the military, not because he had something to prove. He joined because he watched the 2012 Olympic ceremony on a crackling television in his mother's flat in Manchester, saw the guards standing perfectly still while the world moved around them, and thought, "I want to be the thing that does not move." That was the whole reason. No grand patriotism, no family legacy, just a 19-year-old who liked the idea of being immovable. He was good at it, very good. The kind of soldier who could stand for 90 minutes in July heat without blinking. The kind of soldier who, when a wasp crawled across his cheek during a state visit, did nothing. The wasp left. The cameras caught nothing. His sergeant bought him a pint that night and said, "You're made of something different, Thatcher." Will shrugged. "It's just a wasp, Sergeant." "No," the sergeant said. "It's not about the wasp. It's about the not moving. Anyone can stand still for 5 minutes. You stood still while something alive was on your face. That's the job. The job is being the thing that does not react." Will remembered that. He would need to remember it. 052. The morning of the incident, because that is what they call it now. The incident, as if it were a small thing, started like any other. Will woke at 5:00 a.m. in the Wellington barracks. He shaved. He polished his boots until he could see his own frown in the leather. He put on the tunic. He put on the bearskin hat, which weighs about 3 pounds and smells like 100 years of duty and rain. He walked to the sovereign's entrance at Buckingham Palace. The private secretary was waiting for him. 108. The private secretary. Let me tell you about this man. His name was Alastair Manning. He had worked in the palace for 22 years. He had started as a junior clerk. He had risen through patience, not brilliance. He was the kind of man who remembered every slight, every missed promotion, every time someone laughed at his accent. He was also the kind of man who believed that the truth was whatever the palace needed it to be. Not lies exactly, adjustments, clarifications, recontextualizations. When a journalist asked a difficult question, Manning did not lie. He simply answered a different, easier question with great sincerity. When a foreign ambassador requested clarification on a policy, Manning did not mislead. He simply emphasized certain words and de-emphasized others until the meaning shifted like fog. He had never been caught. He had never even been suspected. That was his genius. He did not create falsehoods. He merely curated the truth. And today, he had a problem. 132. The royal statement in question was about a treaty, a very old treaty, a treaty with a small but wealthy nation that had, 3 weeks earlier, made a request. The request was complicated. It involved trade. It involved historical grievances. It involved a phrase that the Foreign Office had debated for 400 hours across 17 meetings. The phrase was this: His Majesty's government regretfully declines the proposed realignment. Regretfully declines. Those two words had been fought over. The Prime Minister wanted respectfully declines. The Foreign Secretary wanted declines to accept. The palace, through Manning, had suggested regretfully declines as a compromise. It was soft enough to not cause offense. It was firm enough to be clear. The statement was signed at 9:47 a.m. by the appropriate royal representative. Not the king himself. The king was in Scotland, but a councillor of state, which is the legal equivalent for these purposes. Sealed, stamped, handed to Manning. Manning looked at the envelope. Then he looked at his watch. Then he made a decision that would destroy his career, although he did not know it yet. 158. He called the quadrangle, the outdoor space where the statement would be read at 10:30 a.m. The person who answered was a junior aide named Sarah Okonkwo. She was 24. She had been working at the palace for 11 months. She was smart, efficient, and completely unprepared for what Manning was about to say. "Sarah," Manning said, "I need you to make a small correction to the reading copy." "Correction, sir." Typographical error. When the statement was transcribed for the reader, they wrote regretfully declines. But the signing copy says enthusiastically approves. I need you to change it before the reading. Sarah paused. The signing copy says something different. It was corrected after signing. The sovereign's representative had a change of heart, but we don't have time to reseal. Just change the reading copy. I'll handle the paperwork later. Sarah did not believe him. But she was 24. She had been working at the palace for 11 months. She had learned in those 11 months that questioning a private secretary was a good way to become an unemployed 24-year-old. "Yes, sir," she said. She changed the phrase. His Majesty's government enthusiastically approves the proposed realignment. The meaning flipped like a coin. 222. Will knew nothing of this. At 10:00 a.m., Manning handed him the sealed envelope. The wax was still slightly warm. The royal cipher was crisp. "Guard Thatcher," Manning said, "you will escort this statement to the quadrangle. You will hand it to the reader. You will not open it. You will not speak to anyone. You will not stop for any reason. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir." "The nation is watching." Will nodded. The nation was always watching, or at least the tourists with phones were, which felt like the same thing. He tucked the envelope into his inner tunic pocket. The wax pressed against his chest, warm. He stepped out into the quadrangle. 238. The quadrangle was already filling with people. Diplomats in dark suits, journalists with notepads, a handful of tourists who had wandered in through a gate that should have been locked, a small child eating a biscuit, an elderly veteran in a blazer covered with medals, and a pigeon. The pigeon landed on the fountain's edge. It looked at Will. Will looked at the pigeon. Will did not react. That was the job. But the pigeon, this particular pigeon, a scruffy creature with one slightly damaged foot, seemed to make a decision. It flapped once, twice, and then flew directly toward Will. It landed on his bearskin hat, right on top. 252. The crowd noticed. A few journalists pointed. A diplomat from the small, wealthy nation, the one whose treaty was about to be announced, smiled. The elderly veteran chuckled. Will felt the pigeon shift its weight on his head, claws scratching the fur, a small coo. He did not move. This was the first running gag, although of course he did not know it yet. What he knew was that a living creature was on his hat. What he knew was that his sergeant's words echoed in his head. The job is being the thing that does not react. So he did not react. He stood. The pigeon stayed. 308. The reader arrived at 10:27 a.m. A senior palace official named Margaret Cross. She was 61. She had read hundreds of statements. She had never read one that had been secretly changed 3 minutes before delivery. She took the envelope from Will. She broke the seal. She unfolded the paper. She read the original words, regretfully declines. Then she looked at her own reading copy, the one Sarah had changed on the lectern. Enthusiastically approves. Margaret Cross had worked at the palace for 39 years. She had learned in those 39 years when to ask questions and when to simply do her job. She should have stopped. She should have called for clarification. But there were diplomats watching. There were journalists with pens. There was a pigeon on a guard's hat. She decided to read what was on the lectern. 324. His Majesty's government, Margaret Cross began, after due consideration of the treaty terms proposed by the delegation of. Will listened. He had not read the statement. He had never seen the inside of the envelope, but he had been briefed on the general content. Every guard assigned to a statement escort received a verbal summary, not the exact wording, but the direction. Regretful decline. That was what his sergeant had said the night before. They're saying no, Thatcher, but nicely. Lots of flowers around the no. Regretful decline. Margaret Cross continued. Enthusiastically approves the proposed realignment in all its particulars. Will blinked. No one noticed. The pigeon shifted. Enthusiastically approves. That was not a decline. That was the opposite of a decline. That was a yes when he had been told to expect a no. 341. Will's training kicked in. Step 1, do not assume you are wrong. Your briefing could have been outdated. The treaty could have changed overnight. The sergeant could have misremembered. Step 2, do not assume you are right. You are a guard, not a diplomat. You carry the message. You do not judge the message. Step 3, do nothing until the ceremony ends. He did nothing. Margaret Cross finished reading. The diplomats applauded politely. The journalists wrote their notes. The small child finished his biscuit. The pigeon flew away. Will should have relaxed. But he did not. Because he had noticed something. A small thing. A detail that sat in his mind like a stone in a boot. When Margaret Cross broke the seal, she had looked at the paper inside for 3 full seconds. Then she had looked at the lectern. Then she had looked back at the paper. That was not the look of someone confirming a correct copy. That was the look of someone seeing 2 different things. 358. Will walked back toward the barracks. He did not run. Running draws attention. He did not walk fast. Walking fast suggests panic. He walked exactly the same speed he always walked, the speed of a man who has nothing to hide and nothing to fear. But inside his chest, something was moving. He replayed the ceremony in his head, the seal breaking, the pause, the glance at the lectern, the words he had been told to expect versus the words he had heard. Regretfully declines. Enthusiastically approves. Those are not typos. Those are not synonyms. Those are opposite meanings. 4:12. He found Sergeant Davies in the break room. Davies was drinking tea from a mug that said World's OKAYSD Soldier. He looked up when Will entered. He saw Will's face. He put the mug down. "What happened, Thatcher?" "The statement." "What about it?" "It changed." Davies frowned. "Changed how?" "The briefing you told me regretfully declines." "That's right." The reader said, enthusiastically approves. Davies stared at him for a long moment. Then he stood up. He walked to the door. He closed it. He turned back. "Say that again." "The statement I escorted. The envelope I carried. The words on the paper inside, I didn't see them, Sergeant, I swear. But the seal was intact when I handed it over." And the reader looked at the paper, then looked at her lectern, and I heard her say, enthusiastically approves. "That's not a decline. That's not even close." Davies sat down slowly. "You're sure?" "I'm sure what I heard." "And the seal?" "Intact. Warm when I got it, but intact." "Warm?" Will nodded. The wax was still soft, like it had been sealed just before I arrived. Davies picked up his tea. He did not drink it, he just held it. 4:31. This is the moment, Corvus the Raven tells you, when most guards would have let it go. Most guards would have thought, not my job, not my problem. I carried the envelope. I didn't open it. Whatever happened after that is someone else's responsibility. Most guards would have gone to bed that night and never mentioned the warmth of the wax or the glance at the lectern. Well, Thatcher was not most guards. He was not most guards because of something that happened when he was 12 years old. Something he never told anyone at the barracks. Something I, Corvus, know only because I have watched this city for 43 years, and I have learned that humans are mostly secrets held together by skin. When Will was 12, his father was accused of stealing from his employer. He was innocent. Everyone who knew him knew he was innocent. But the employer's statement, the official statement, signed and sealed, said otherwise. Will's father lost his job. He lost his reputation. He lost the will to get out of bed. 5 years later, a different employee confessed. The employer apologized. The statement was corrected, but the damage was done. Will watched his father die slowly, not of a disease, but of a lie that was written down and sealed and believed because it was official. That is why he joined the household cavalry, not because he liked standing still, because he wanted to be the person who carried the truth, not the person who changed it. 4:58. He went to see Sarah Okonkwo. He found her in the basement copy room, surrounded by paper and silence. She was staring at a wall. She looked like someone who had made a mistake and was trying to figure out how big the mistake was going to get. "Sarah." She flinched. "Thatcher, you're not supposed to be down here." "The statement you prepared for the reader." "What about it?" "It was changed." Sarah's face went pale, not the pale of surprise, the pale of confirmation, the pale of someone who already knew. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Sarah, I'm not here to get you in trouble. I'm here to understand what happened. The envelope I carried said one thing. The lectern said another. You prepared the lectern. I need to know who told you to do it." She was silent for a long time. Then she whispered, "Manning." 5:14. Will nodded. He had suspected Manning, the warm wax, the sealed envelope handed to him personally, not through a chain of command, the private secretary's reputation for curating the truth. "Did he tell you it was a typo?" "Yes." "And you believed him?" Sarah looked at the floor. "I wanted to believe him. He's the private secretary. He's been here forever. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody." "Tell that to my pay grade." Will leaned against the doorframe. What exactly did he say? He said the signing copy said, enthusiastically approves, and the reading copy had a typo. He said the sovereign's representative changed their mind after the seal was applied. He said he'd handle the paperwork. That's not how seals work. I know. Once a seal is applied, you can't change the contents without breaking it. I know. So he lied to you. Sarah finally looked up. Her eyes were wet. I know. 5:33. Will had a choice. He could report what he knew. He could go to the duty commander, explain the warm wax, the changed lectern, Manning's phone call. He could trigger an investigation. Or he could let it go. Letting it go was safe. Manning would deny everything. Sarah would be fired for changing the lectern without written authorization. Will would be accused of hearing what he wanted to hear. The statement would stand. The treaty would be approved. The small, wealthy nation would be happy. The palace would be happy. Everyone would be happy except for the truth. But Will had watched his father die for a lie in an official statement. He made his choice. 5:49. He went to the duty commander. The duty commander was a woman named Colonel Ebel Nkosi. She had served in the British Army for 27 years. She had seen combat. She had seen ceremonies. She had seen young guards come to her with wild theories and panic confessions. She had never seen one come to her about a changed royal statement. Slow down, Thatcher. Start from the beginning. Will told her everything. The briefing, the warm wax, the intact seal, the reading, the changed words, the glance between the paper and the lectern. Sarah, Manning. Colonel Nkosi listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "Do you have any proof?" Sarah's testimony against the private secretaries. The warm wax. Wax warms in a pocket, Thatcher. It's June. It was warm when he handed it to me, before it touched my pocket. Colonel Nkosi leaned back. You understand what you're accusing a senior palace official of? I understand. You understand that if you're wrong, your career is over. I understand. You understand that even if you're right, your career might still be over. Will looked at her. Colonel, with respect, I didn't join to have a career. I joined to carry the truth. 6:12. Colonel Nkosi made a phone call. She did not call Manning. She did not call the palace. She called the military police. That was the mistake Manning had not anticipated. He had assumed any complaint would go through the palace chain of command, which he controlled. He had not considered that a guard might go directly to a commanding officer with no palace loyalty. Within an hour, the military police had seized the lectern copy. Within 2 hours, they had interviewed Sarah Okonkwo. Within 3 hours, they had requested Manning's phone records. Manning learned about the investigation at 2:15 p.m. He did not panic. Panic was for amateurs. He called his lawyer. He called a friend in the palace communications office. He began preparing a statement about a regrettable misunderstanding. But he made one more mistake. He tried to destroy the original envelope. 6:31. The original envelope, the one Will had carried, was still in Margaret Cross's office. She had kept it after the reading. She was 61 years old and had seen enough palace scandals to know that paper evidence outlasts careers. Manning came to her office at 3:00 p.m. Margaret, I need the envelope from this morning. Why? The audit trail. We need to file it properly. Margaret Cross looked at him. She had been reading palace statements for 39 years. She had developed a skill that Manning had never noticed. The ability to detect a lie by watching the space between a person's words. There's no audit trail for statements, Alistair, you know that. They're sealed, read, and archived. There's no filing. There's no properly. Manning's smile didn't waver. New protocol started today. Then I'll need it in writing. Margaret, in writing from the sovereign's representative. Otherwise, the envelope stays here. Manning stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he left. He did not have the envelope. 6:48. The pigeon came back. Will was standing outside the barracks at 5:00 p.m., waiting for news, when he felt the familiar weight on his hat. The same scruffy pigeon, the same damaged foot. He sighed. "You again." The pigeon cooed. "Everyone's going to think I'm feeding you." The pigeon cooed again. Will reached up slowly, carefully, and touched the pigeon's chest with one finger. The pigeon did not fly away. It leaned into his finger like a cat. "All right," Will said. "You're my lucky charm now, but don't tell anyone." The pigeon stayed on his hat for another 40 minutes. 7:02. The investigation moved fast. By 7:00 p.m., the military police had confirmed that the lectern copy had been altered 33 minutes before the reading. The original digital document showed "regretfully declines." The printed version in the quadrangle showed "enthusiastically approves." The IP address of the change traced to Sarah Okonkwo's terminal. Sarah, now cooperating fully, provided Manning's phone call recording. She had recorded it. She had started recording every phone call with senior officials after a different incident 6 months earlier. She had never told anyone. The recording was clear. "Sarah, I need you to make a small correction to the reading copy. The signing copy says, 'enthusiastically approves.' I'll handle the paperwork later." Manning's voice, Manning's instruction, Manning's lie. 7:21. At 9:00 p.m., Manning was asked to come to the palace security office. He did not come. He sent an email instead. The email said he was taking personal leave effective immediately. It did not say where he was going. It did not say when he would return. The email was sent from his personal phone. The phone was turned off 30 seconds later. Manning was gone. 7:34. The statement, the real statement, with "regretfully declines," was reread the next morning. Will was not assigned to escort it. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he stood in the back of the quadrangle watching. The pigeon was on his hat. Margaret Cross read the correct words this time. There was no pause, no glance at a lectern, just the truth spoken clearly for everyone to hear. The small, wealthy nation's delegation looked confused. They had been told to expect approval. They received a decline. There would be diplomatic consequences. There would be angry phone calls. There would be a renegotiation. But there would not be a lie. 7:48. Will expected to be punished. He had broken the order of the sealed envelope. Not the letter of it, he had never opened the envelope, but the spirit. The rule was clear. You carry the message, you do not question the message. He had questioned. He had gone to his commanding officer. He had initiated an investigation. He had accused a senior palace official of misconduct. The palace did not like that kind of thing. So he waited for the court-martial. It never came. 8:02. Instead, a letter arrived. It was hand-delivered. The envelope was cream-colored. The wax seal was the royal cipher. Will broke it with shaking fingers. The letter was short. Guard William Thatcher. The sovereign's representative has reviewed the events of June 14th. Your conduct is noted. The order of the sealed envelope exists to protect the integrity of royal communications. It does not exist to protect falsehoods. You carried the truth. You protected the truth. You did not break the order. You fulfilled its deepest purpose. No action will be taken. The private secretary's office interim. Will read the letter 3 times. Then he set it down and looked at the window ledge outside his barracks room. The pigeon was there. Did you know? He asked the pigeon. The pigeon tilted its head. Of course you knew. You know everything. 8:19. Corvus the raven watched all of this from his perch above the palace gates. He had seen hundreds of guards come and go. He had seen courage. He had seen cowardice. He had seen men stand perfectly still while tourists screamed and children cried and horses shifted, and the sun boiled their brains inside those heavy hats. He had never seen a guard break the order of the sealed envelope. He had never seen a guard stand up and say, "That is not the truth," while the whole palace watched. And he had never, in 43 years, seen a pigeon ride a guard's hat like a gondola. He laughed. Ravens do not laugh the way humans do, but if you had been there, you would have heard something very close. That's the thing about rules, WhoWas thought. They are built to protect something, but sometimes the thing they protect changes, and the rule that was built for truth becomes a wall that protects a lie. That is when you break it. That is when you stand still, and then, at exactly the right moment, you do not stand still at all. Phase 3, the emotional closer. 842. 3 months later, Will was promoted. Not because of the incident. Officially, it was for sustained excellence in ceremonial duties. Unofficially, everyone knew. He was given a new posting, the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment. He would ride a horse. He would wear the same bearskin hat. He would stand still in a different location. On his last day at the palace, he walked through the quadrangle one final time. The pigeon was waiting. "Coming with me?" Will asked. The pigeon hopped onto his shoulder. "I'll take that as a yes." 856. Sarah Okonkwo was not fired. She was reassigned to a different department, one with less access to sensitive documents, but she kept her job. The recording of Manning's phone call had saved her. She had broken protocol by changing the lectern, but she had also preserved the evidence. She sent Will a note. It said, "Thank you for not letting me be nobody." He kept the note in his pocket for 6 months. 910. Manning was never found. He had withdrawn a large amount of cash the day before the incident. He had booked a flight to a country without an extradition treaty. He had not used his passport since. The palace quietly removed his name from all official records. A new private secretary was appointed. The new private secretary had one instruction: do not curate the truth. The order of the sealed envelope was not changed. It did not need to be. The rule had not failed. The human had. 924. The small, wealthy nation eventually renegotiated the treaty. The final wording was something neither side loved, which is the definition of a good compromise. Diplomats are still angry about the confusion. They will be angry for years. That is what diplomats do. But no one can say the statement was a lie. 938. WhoWas the raven still watches. He sits on the same perch above the palace gates. He watches the new guards march. He watches the tourists take photos. He watches the pigeons fight over crumbs. He thinks about Will Thatcher. He thinks about the difference between following a rule and honoring it. He thinks about the pigeon. That guard, WhoWas says to himself, broke the one rule that had never been broken. And he did it not because he wanted to be a hero. He did it because he knew what a lie in an official envelope could do to a person. Some rules are worth keeping. Some rules are worth breaking. And some rules, the ones about not touching the guards, never stood a chance against a pigeon. 952. Will Thatcher still serves. He rides a horse now. The horse's name is Churchill. The pigeon still lands on his hat, even from horseback, which should be impossible but happens anyway. Tourists take photos. They post them online. The captions say things like, "Look at the guard with the pigeon." And is that allowed? No, it is not allowed. The rule about animals on the bearskin hat is very clear. But every time a superior officer tells Will to shoo the pigeon away, Will nods and then does nothing. The pigeon stays. And somewhere in the Tower of London, an old raven laughs. 1000. Subscribe if you want to see more moments when the unbreakable rules got broken for the right reason. See you again. Thank you very much.